I ended up setting up my own company called Milieux Property. And what we do is we help international clients who, as you were saying, who wish to buy here in France, but who don't live here, usually don't speak the language, and they need someone to just get it done for them. So our role is to act as the intermediary between international clients. And so our services really bridge that gap and provide you with the professional support that you need to execute a purchase as a foreign investor.
You're listening to the She Renovates podcast. You're listening to She Renovates, the podcast for women who want to renovate to create an income and a life they love.
Hello, everyone. So back again with another episode of She Renovates. And so I sometimes bring on people who've come through our boot camp for a few reasons, but one, because it's really interesting to know the different ways that people, I think, use their renovating skills, in their life. And today is no exception. So I have Ben Dinning on the call today, or on the podcast, and I'm just going to quickly read through his bio for you, and then I'll introduce you and he can elaborate on it. So as a lover of interior design, property and languages, I have combined my passions to create Milieux Property, an end-to-end service for international buyers who love France and wish to purchase property here. We are based in Paris and Aix-en-Provence and guide our clients through all steps of the purchase process, including market research, visiting the properties, due diligence, negotiation, finance if needed, legal requirements, and renovations. At Milieux Property, we can source any property type for you, including cottages in the French countryside, pied-à-terre or pied-à-terre, in Paris, beach houses, ski chalets, and chateau. If you are looking to purchase a holiday home or residence in France, Milieux Property is your milieu ami. Okay, so welcome, Ben.
Thanks, Bernadette. Lovely to see you again.
Yeah, so I should say that I actually met up with Ben in Paris, and we had an amazing lunch at a cafe called Moconuts.
Yes.
It was cool,
right.
wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really cool. In the 11th arrondissement, which is like the hip area of Paris.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, very nice. And yeah, I was surprised because I had vegetarian, because the French have very interesting meat choices, which I wasn't in love with. But I just was blown away at how much flavor they could inject into vegetables. So it was very amazing. And we managed to catch up, and so here we are. So do you want to just really quickly tell us, a bit about you as a person, and then we'll get into your journey as a international buyer's agent?
Sure. So my family and I, we moved over here to France nearly 4 years ago now. We were ready for a new adventure, and we've got 2 young kids, and we kind of thought they were about 4.5 at the time, or nearly 5, and we had wanted to go and live in Europe, and we kind of thought, look, if we don't go now while the kids are really young, then we'll basically have to wait till they're 18. So we just thought, let's just go. I've got family in Italy. My husband's got family in the UK, and I spoke French. And so we ended up just deciding on France, kind of in the middle. And I did want to educate the kids in French. I wanted them to learn the language. And so here we are. So we made it to France. And then so I ended up setting up my own company called Milieux Property. And what we do is we help international clients who, as you were saying, who wish to buy here in France, but who don't live here, usually don't speak the language, and they need someone to just get it done for them. Because as you can imagine, buying a property remotely is well, virtually impossible. So, and especially for Australians, it's not like you can just jet over and visit a chateau or a Parisian apartment every time you see something online that you like. So our role is to act as the intermediary between international clients. Mostly I've been working with Americans, British, other Europeans, so non-French, but say I've got a Finnish client, so a young Dutch couple. So a bit of everything, just not French clients is kind of my core business. And so we do all the work for our clients here. We find the properties, we visit them for you. I'll do all the due diligence with like a surveyor, for example, or an architect or builder, or a combination, depending on what the property type is and how old the building is. We don't want to find any hidden or expensive surprises along the way after we've made a purchase. So that's a really important step that I think people forget about that. You know, like someone from, say, the States could see this amazing chateau online and, oh, wow, it's not as expensive as I thought. I'll just pop over and buy that. But, well, who's checking it? Like, do we know that the structural integrity of it is good? Have you got a lawyer? Like, there's just so much that goes into buying a property over here. And so our services really bridge that gap and provide you with the professional support that you need to execute a purchase as a foreign investor. So after we've done the due diligence, just coming back to those steps, we will then correctly value the property. And then I will negotiate on behalf of my clients to get the property for the best price possible. And then, so those are really the purchasing steps. Then afterwards, thanks to, for example, your course, I did a Bachelor of Interior Design. We can then do the renovations for our clients afterwards if the property needs that, if it needs a refresh, or even if it needs a full makeover, we can do that. And then alongside those steps, we do provide the professional team that you need to make a purchase, because like I was saying, you can't just Google a lawyer over here, or same with a builder or an architect or a surveyor, or do I want to buy the property in a company structure? You know, we've got all of those people here that can speak English. They are specialists in dealing with foreign investors. And so I essentially act as the one-stop shop to bridge you to all of those professional services that you might need to turn the dream of buying a property in France into a reality. So that's what I ended up doing, because I had fallen in love with property probably, God, what year is it? 2024. I would say over 15 years ago, we bought our first property, just in our personal portfolio, I mean, and renovated it. And it was after that I got the property bug, you could say. And then, so during, I guess, over that next 15 years, we've bought probably 6 or 7 properties, renovated nearly all of them, sold a few, kept a few, like flipped some, a bit of everything, and including putting into practice the techniques from your course, which was, I'm going to say now 5 years ago, but I'd be guessing.
Oh, it's more than that, I think.
Is it more? Yeah, it probably is. Time goes so quickly. But so it really just came from my personal love of property, my personal love of interior design and renovating, and putting that together with my ability to speak French. Essentially that's all sort of come together to into Milieux Property, our brand over here.
Yeah. I'm going to skip the next question because I think you've answered it, but I'm really curious to know about the pitfalls. Like, buying in France has some interesting, and buying and doing work and renovating and whatever has some interesting quirks, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was probably one of the, I think there's a question coming later about the challenges, but this is kind of the same thing. It's learning the new landscape and environment and rules. It's like learning, well, pardon the pun, it is like learning a foreign language. So not only is everything in French, which that's obvious, but the rules themselves are completely different. And so that's why I surround myself with specialists. So I don't claim to know all the ins and outs of all of the professions. So that's why I've got a team of great lawyers around me, mortgage brokers, architects. I mean, especially on the architecture side of things, like as you know, like in all our Australian capital cities, we've got heritage overlays, for example.
Yeah.
Imagine that in France. Like we've got buildings that are over 1,000 years old. So there's just a lot that comes with that. So you can't just waltz in and buy a 1,000-year-old chateau. I mean, you can, but do you know what you're signing up for? So there's a lot of often those old buildings are classified. It's called monument historique, which just means historical monument. And so you can't just go in and renovate it how you like. You must respect the rules of what we would think of as a heritage overlay, but it's kind of on steroids. And so even so, if you were to buy one of those buildings, for example, you must have a certain type of architect who works on that. And that architect has to have studied not just architecture, but then they've had to have done a specialization in the old buildings, old architecture. And same with all the artisans. So if someone's going to come and redo the windows or anything, it has to be a specially qualified artisan or builder who can work on that project for you. So on the building and renovating side of things, there is a lot to consider, as you would imagine.
Yeah.
And and that goes for apartments too. I mean, the same rule applies. Like these old apartments in Paris or other major cities, they might not be classified as monument historique, but they're still 200 years old, or however old they are. So there's a lot more quirks in those buildings. I mean, you probably can't install air conditioning in many of them, which is why we're sort of known to not have a lot of aircon in a lot of the old buildings here. So there's a lot to contend with on the building and renovating side. And then on the legal side, it's another whole kettle of fish as well. Yeah. I mean, the system is slow. It's quite antiquated. And I mean, you're buying and transacting property off a platform that is, again, hundreds of years old of laws. And like these laws, property laws, just keep getting modified and I guess modernized, you could say. But the underlying, what they were written on is like from hundreds of years ago. So the titles are like sometimes handwritten on these like scripts. And it's just, I mean, it is a very different landscape. And so that is really one of the main reasons why I set up the company so that you just don't waltz in here and just make mistakes thinking that you know the rules or that you can do it alone, because really that is how costly mistakes can be made.
Oh yeah.
I recently for a friend, it wasn't a client, but a sale just fell through like in the last week because something wasn't checked. The equivalent of the body corporate, it was discovered later on that, there was this tiny little clause in there that could be interpreted as don't allow Airbnb. I mean, obviously the rules for this building were written 200 years ago, but somebody in that body corporate said, well, to me, that means you can't do short-term rentals. And then other people were like, well, I think you can. And so it's just, there's a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross. And so you absolutely must have the right professional team around you if you want to make a purchase anywhere overseas, and especially France. It's quite complicated if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. And so when you set off armed with your renovating and design skills, how on earth did you figure it all out?
Well, look, I have been coming to France now for over 30 years. And I've got a really good, I guess, address book. So I've got lawyers, real estate agents, architects, like just industry contacts, essentially, who helped get me started. And I'm still just the intermediary. Like I was saying, I don't know all the rules and all the laws. So I actually just connect my clients to the specialists of their area. And now, obviously, because I'm in all the client meetings and I've been doing this for a few years now, I know enough that I can explain at a high level the concepts and things that people need to know. But like I said, I essentially will just connect my clients to the right specialists that they need, and they are really the ones that have the deep knowledge in their field.
Yeah.
I rely on a wide team.
So when you do a renovation, sort of what sort of scope, is there a typical project that you would do, or do you supervise it yourself? So how does that work?
At the moment, I haven't got time to supervise the projects myself, only because there's so much happening in terms of the property acquisition side of things. So one great thing though, so when I came here, I kind of thought, look, if I'm going to do this company, I'm going to go and get myself an interior design degree. So I signed up for a bachelor, like a 3-year Bachelor of Interior Design, which was accelerated into 1 year. It was in the middle of COVID, so everything was closed. All I did was study till midnight every night. It was really intense and really good. So I've actually got about 30 interior designers and architects that I can call on for any project type. So, and that's geographically sort of diverse and project style diversity as well. So again, I'm the intermediary. I set up the person with who is the right interior designer or architect for this job. And including, like I was saying before, I've got a couple of really amazing architects who are fully licensed for those historical monument jobs. Like I'm talking like architects who have worked on the Louvre Museum and like incredible kind of contacts. So so I will set up the person with the right interior designer or architect for that job.
Awesome. And so are you do your professionals experience the same challenges with getting trades as we're experiencing at the moment? So since COVID, we've had quite a shortage. And so I'm just wondering whether it's the same in Europe.
Yeah. We've got a shortage of those good trades, and the cost of them has gone up and the cost of the materials has gone up. So that is, from what I understand, a worldwide problem. They said everything basically went up 20 or 25% overnight here from when everything reopened after COVID and jobs were getting approved and you could go back out and build. Just the shortage of materials and expertise just sent prices skyrocketing. So that we have the same issue.
Yeah. And so the other thing is so in Australia, we, a lot of the building supplies come from China. Are you getting the same amount of Chinese imports, or are you getting more of a European?
That's a good question. Like the raw materials?
Just things like, tapware.
Yeah.
Light fittings.
I would say it's probably more Eastern European.
Yeah.
I mean, so I think we've probably got a similar dynamic in that, you've got your luxury line and then there's sort of like the more middle ground and then the cheaper stuff. But I'd say like our luxury stuff, same as for Australia, it's probably like made in Italy, made in Germany, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Then I guess, Eastern European is kind of like a good compromise because it's not as expensive, but the quality is really good.
Yeah. I must admit, on last week's episode, I interviewed an interior designer from Sydney who is importing kitchens, all sorts of supplies from Turkey. And so I'm actually going through the experiment with her of sourcing our kitchen from Turkey because it's pretty high spec. And so I'm really, I'm pretty sure it's going to go ahead. So I'm really interested to see how that works.
Yes.
Because that as I understand, the quality is much better than not that I would go to China for a kitchen, but if I did, I think that the Turkish import would be far superior. So
yes,
interesting.
And Romanian as well. I've found.
Okay.
Romanian, like they are actually known for doing great windows and things, like replacing window frames and
Wow.
good quality and cheap. Like I've I haven't had a client do this, but we nearly bought a chateau for one of my American clients, and it had about, I'm going to say 50 or 60 windows.
Oh God.
And they all were old, like single glazed, the joinery and everything, like they all needed to be replaced essentially. And so I think in France, to replace one of those old windows like nicely, it's about €2,500 per window. And so
Oh
if
my
you're doing
gosh.
60, it's a lot, like that's a big job. And I think to get them done in Romania was going to be something like 1,500, like a big jump, like 33% less and that's
Okay.
like installed and brought over from Romania, installed. So yeah, so definitely we can rely on Eastern European suppliers over here.
Yeah. And so what sort of trends are you noticing in interior design in Europe? Is it still very traditional, or are more modern generations going for more modern styles? What are you seeing?
I see both over here. So I go to the trade fairs once a year, usually. I mean, that really beautiful modern contemporary stuff is really popular in high-end apartments over here well, I'm not in Paris right now, but in
Yeah.
Paris.
Yeah.
But similarly, like you can go in and see like a beautiful old apartment just fully decked out with traditional, beautiful antique French furniture as well. So I find that it can go in either direction. I personally am loving going to these the secondhand antique stores over here in France. We've moved house recently and we had a bit of extra space, and oh gosh, I love we just bought this beautiful solid oak, one of those secretary desks, that you open out the €180, fully refurbished. It weighs a
Oh my
ton, and
gosh.
just for €180, I could have got an IKEA desk, or I could have got this beautiful old 100 years old oak French antique. So honestly, there's room for both, and both are being exploited over here. But I really recommend to my clients when they're coming over here buying a new house that you go to those secondhand antique stores, because some of them have seriously incredible stuff and it's really not that expensive.
Yeah,
Like the
that's
cutlery,
amazing.
the glassware, the light fittings, tables and chairs, all of that. It's really beautiful.
So now you're making us really jealous,
Yeah.
Ben, because we
Well,
all
when you're
love
here
that.
next, I'll take you.
Great,
Yeah.
great. Well, I suspect I will have a trip to Turkey in the next few months in
Okay.
order to I don't know whether I'll get as far as France. We'll see how we go.
Nice.
Yeah. So what would you say your biggest challenge was in getting set up, and like how did you get around it?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I would have to just boil that down to French administration. I mean, setting up a company here was not easy. I mean, I do have an Italian passport, so I'm a European citizen, which does help, obviously. I mean, we have the right to just live here, so I didn't need to get any kind of visa, or all of those kind of immigration problems are not an issue for us. So that's a huge thing. I don't know how someone would do it if they didn't have that, honestly. But then, yeah, the actual company setup stuff, it's not like Australia. You don't just like go online and get an ABN or an ACN or whatever. Like it honestly took me, I would say, 6 months of treading water, just going around and around in circles with the accountant, with a lawyer, with this person, that person. Everyone kind of wants to give you their 2 cents worth of what you should do. You should do this, should do that. And then in the end, you kind of just have to make a decision and go with it. So I would say just the pure navigating the French administration kind of system was the hardest thing. That thankfully is over. And look, one thing I will say is it means that it's high barriers to entry. You can't just waltz over here and set up a company that easily. Like I really had to chip away at it. So I guess there's a small amount of comfort knowing that I'm through that bit. And yeah, it's not that easy for competitors to just come in and
Yeah.
do the same.
Where do your customers come from? Like, how do people find out about you?
Yeah. So Look, most of my clients are English speakers. So Americans, I would say, would be the most popular, British, a couple of Aussies, and then, like I was saying, some other Europeans, like non-French Europeans. And it's all social media and my website and my Facebook group. It's been incredible.
Yes, for anyone listening, you'll have to go and join the Facebook group because it's like eye candy on steroids. A chateau a day.
Yes, the Chateau Facebook group has been really successful for me. I set it up about 6 months ago, and a few days ago we hit the 50,000 follower mark.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It really went exponential, and I honestly did not expect it to catch fire the way that it has. But to my surprise and to my pleasant surprise, it has really caught on. I think people love the content. It's a very happy space. Like, I know a lot of social media groups, you can often get these just, like the negative discussions and arguments and things. And we just don't have that in our group, or very, very rarely. It's a positive, happy place. And look, honestly, for 95% of members, I guess they're probably not in the market for a chateau, but it's just fun to look at what's here. And really, I did set it up as like a shop front, if you like, to show the rest of the world the amazing architecture that we have here in France, and surprisingly how inexpensive these chateaus are. Like, people are shocked by it. Like, I post things that, I sort of divided into 3 categories. You've got your luxury listings that are 5 million plus, for example. There's not that many of them, but they are absolutely stunning. And I love posting them because it's just to see what's possible. It's just really fun to see, like, this is a luxury chateau listing, and people just love them. Then you've got your kind of middle ground, sort of the 1 to 3 million, bit more affordable, like holiday home kind of thing. It's still a lot of money, but there is a market for that. And then the ones that tend to really catch fire, I find these ones that are sub 1 million euros. Incredible, like beautiful chateaus, like not huge, but let's say 500 square meters, 8 bedrooms, pool, land. And I get friends from home just saying, how are you finding these chateaus for like 800,000 euros? Like, I can't even buy a flat in, Frankston or the western suburbs of Sydney for that kind of money. And over there, I'm getting a chateau on 20 hectares. So they have been really popular. So the group kind of just promotes what is available here, how surprisingly affordable it is. And then obviously my personal link to the group is that the services that I offer, if the small percentage of people who are members of the group actually want to buy one, well, then we can step in and provide those services and bridge the gap, so that it could turn into a reality for anyone that is genuinely interested in buying something over here.
And so do most people that buy them, do they use them as holiday houses? What's the go?
Yeah, mostly yes. I would say, I'd say maybe a quarter of people are buying something to move, to come and live here. And then the majority is more second home. Okay. Or there's another category of, they're going to come and live here, but it will be a business. It's really popular with especially the English clientele. So you buy either a chateau, or it doesn't have to be a chateau, it can just be like a beautiful like cottage in the countryside. And it's got the outbuildings, which they turn into guest accommodation, like a B&B style thing. That's really popular. So yeah, I'd say that's probably a third as well. People that want to come here and set up a business.
Wow. And are they, so is the Airbnb scene still quite buoyant there?
Yeah, it's got rules. There are rules that obviously we have to stick to. So I am not up to speed on what's happening in Australia, but in Paris, for example, so our Airbnb market here in Paris, you can only rent out your primary residence for up to 120 days per year. And then secondary residence, I don't think you're allowed to rent out. It's strict.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So we have in Sydney, your secondary like investment properties, you can rent out, well, any property, no, investment properties, you can rent out for 180 days a year, but there are some little clauses that sort of circumvent that. And in your part of your own home, there are no restrictions. So it's better from that point of view. That's interesting. Yeah, okay. And so
I think they were trying to, I guess, support the hotel industry over here. That's my guess.
Yeah. Well, of course, there's the same. Well, it's not so much the hotel industry, it's the housing shortage that's getting, putting a lot of pressure on Airbnb.
Yes.
But yeah. Do you have the same problems with rental properties?
In Paris, yes.
Okay.
It's almost like there's two worlds over here. There's the Paris market, and other big cities do have their own dynamic, which is more similar to like a Melbourne or a Sydney.
Yeah.
So we have similar issues where it is very hard to find a rental, vacancy rates are low, similar problems. But you go rural and it's the opposite. Like houses sit on the market for a long time. They don't move quickly. It's another whole kind of category of housing. And getting a loan, for example, I could get finance for a client who wants to buy an apartment in Paris tomorrow at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
But if they say, oh, I want to buy a property in the countryside on land, the banks will find it much harder to get finance for that kind of property type. So it does have a huge impact on whether projects go ahead or not, as to how rural is it, does it need renovations. The banks are really, really fussy on what they will or won't lend for.
Okay. It's interesting. So just a couple more questions. What does a day in your life look like? Because you're quite a long way from Paris, so you live in Provence. So, are you driving miles? Like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
I mean, yeah, it's a good question. It depends on what's going on. So I guess I work from home. So I've either got like desk time. I'm here on the phone to agents. I'm looking for listings online. I'm building presentations for clients. I'm, trying to extend my network of professionals. But then I've got my visits. So when I'm like actively looking at properties, I'm all over France. So it depends on where the properties are. And obviously that is dictated by where my clients want to purchase. So it does sort of I've got 4 or 5 areas in France that tend to be the most popular. So I find myself back there quite frequently. And that's Normandy and Brittany up in the northwest. Then you've got the Loire Valley, which is just to the south west of Paris. Then you've got kind of the southwest of France. It's called La Dordogne, and that's like the Bordeaux or the countryside around Bordeaux. And then Provence, where I live, obviously that's nice and easy. That's close. And then of course you've got Paris as well, like for the more apartment style purchasing. So I do tend to end up in those more popular places. And so it really depends on what's going on. So just last Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, I was in Bordeaux. We had an offer accepted on a great apartment for a lovely American client. So I go there, I do the visits with them. I had to go and meet structural engineer. We wanted to make sure that the building was okay. That was one of our conditions that our offer was just subject to this visit. So I really wanted to go to the visit, make sure that it went well. And so we're actually just waiting on the report now. It should be any day now. So yeah, so some of my time I'm on the road, I'm visiting properties. And then the rest of the time I'm here just working the phones, doing the Facebook group, marketing. I got a couple of interns who help me with everything, with the social media, with researching the properties. So it's a bit of a mixed bag as to, and also because of the nature of my work, like my hours are very strange. So for example, if I'm chatting to clients from California, obviously that needs to be kind of 7 or 8 p.m. French time, and that's about 9 or 10 in LA. And then, Aussies, like what we're doing now, I'll sort of tend to meet at 9 or if I can, 8:30, and then so it's just the hours can be quite different as well. And that will obviously dictate how my day goes too.
Yeah, awesome. And just before we finish, just really want to touch on French life. I've always loved France and I've been there a lot, but it had been a few years since we had been, and I just really love the amazing produce. Like, what is it? What is it about that country that has that incredible produce everywhere when we've got a country that's massive? And yeah.
Well, one huge thing that I find that's a big difference between, say, France and Italy and like Spain and these kind of Mediterranean countries, they respect the seasons of the fruit and vegetables. So they don't use like the genetically modified like sprays, and like they don't try to grow stuff that's out of season just for the convenience of people. Whereas you know what it's like at home, you can go and buy tomatoes whenever you want. You can almost buy stone fruit whenever you want. And it's like, oh, this is great, but is it? I mean, it's watery and this is not how it's meant to be. So here I find they just really respect the seasons. Like you can just buy the summer fruits in summer, and then you have to go without when they're not available. So to me, that's a big one. And I mean, the climate of France is such that a lot of like, in the south of France is pretty warm. So a lot of things grow here that maybe you couldn't grow up in the north of France, where it is conversely, it's really cold. So the diversity of just where we are, like on the map, does provide a good variety of what you can grow here. And then I think just there's such a food culture in France, Italy, Spain, that it's just part of it. Like you can't get away with producing bad quality food, or your restaurant will go out of business if you're not doing a good job, because people expect high standards. So I think it's just part of the culture that food is to be respected. You got to do a good job of it, or people won't pay for it.
Yeah. I must admit, when we were in Paris, and David was with us initially, and then Grace came later. And so David and Stephen would go out like the hunter-gatherers in the morning to get the croissant for breakfast. And they said the first day, the boulangerie that they had gone to was, it was rated 4.5. And then they started searching the ratings. So they moved up, 4.6, 4.7. The last one got to 4.9, the ratings. Wow. And you could taste the difference. They were like divine. So we really appreciated the food. And I also appreciate how they just seem to do everything so beautifully, like the houses, how they dress their tables. And it's not really lavish. There's just a lot of thought and respect has gone into it, and it's very noticeable. So I envy you in some ways.
I found the same thing in coming over here. There's a lot of respect for like the food, as you say. I mean, we had the same thing. Like I've got different bakeries for different occasions. Like we've got people coming over. We're going to go to that bakery for the baguettes, or there's a different bakery that I'll go to for the croissant. And like there's so much care goes into these things. And I mean, just the bakery example, like they will bake fresh bread 2 or 3 times per day, which it's crazy. Like, so you go in the morning for one fresh loaf, it's just warm out of the oven, and then you can go back again for lunch. And so there's a lot of pride in doing a good job of the food and making it look and taste good.
When we met in France, we spoke about something you were doing, sort of like JVs for people who want to buy chateaus. Do you want to just quickly talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So so through running this Facebook group, I was getting a lot of inquiries or just sort of commentary, I guess you could say, about people just saying, oh, I'm obsessed with these chateaus. I love them, but, I can't afford it or whatever, which is like a common issue. Not everybody has 2 million euros in the bank. And the other thing is, just side note, is you can't get finance for a chateau. So it's only cash buying. So it does rule a lot of people out. And I was getting a lot of people saying, look, I can't afford to buy one in cash. I can't afford the whole thing on my own. I just wish I could buy a share of a chateau. And also, I just need it as a holiday home. I don't want it sitting there empty 11 months of the year when I just want to go a few weeks of the year. Like, is there something I can do? So I kind of thought, I'm getting so many of these questions about sharing a chateau. And I've got these 50,000 people that are sort of interested in the topic. And so I'm actually setting up a project now where you can buy a share of a chateau as a holiday home. So I won't get too much into the weeds, but essentially we set up a company. There's a specific company structure in France that is used to buy property only. So we'll set up a company in that structure, and then you will buy a share in that company. And so let's say, for example, we've got a chateau that's, just using round numbers, it's 1.2 million euros. There's 12 shareholders. Each person puts in 100,000, and you own 1/12 of the company instead of owning 1/12 of the building. So, because if you can imagine, if you want to exit, very hard to sell 1/12 of a building, whereas you can sell your shares in the company quite easily. So that's just the latest project that we're working on to make it accessible to people who can't afford to or don't want to have a whole chateau on their own that would sit there empty most of the time. This is a way of tapping into that market in a group setting.
So you will share the details into the Facebook group when you've got that up and running?
Yeah. So I just went out not long ago doing a bit of market research, a poll of people that were interested, and had a few hundred people come back to me saying, yep, I want to know more. So my next step will be to run a webinar. So I will announce the webinar in the Facebook group. And during that webinar, I'll go into much more detail about how it works, where are the chateaus going to be. I'm going to sort of choose maybe 3 or 4 of the most popular locations. I'm just going to go for fully renovated chateaus. Like, it's not really the moment to do renovations. I just want to be able to buy something that's turnkey. And so I'll run a webinar through the Facebook group in the coming weeks.
Wow. That's very exciting.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, you will get business out of that, I know. Everyone that
I hope
comes
so.
on says, yeah.
Why not? Well, you might want to do it too, just personally.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on. And if any of our listeners want to buy a chateau in France, how do they get in contact with you?
Yes. So my social media channels is probably the best way to reach me, or my website, which is milieuxproperty.com. I guess it'll probably be on the show notes or something like that. Yeah. Or then otherwise you can just find me on Instagram. And my Chateau Facebook group is called Chateau with an X, Buying, Selling, Renovating. So you can find me through there as well.
Beautiful. Well, we will include those links. So thanks so much for sharing a little bit of your life. I love the direction you've taken, and I'll be really interested to see how your business blossoms.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Bernadette.
You're very welcome.
This is the She Renovates podcast. To discover how to harness the power of renovating, check out theschoolofrenovating.com.